Look at this edge. Seriously, just look at it. We're talking about a blade so sharp it glides through printer paper like it's not even there. It slices through a full, unopened carton of milk without even slowing down, sending a glorious cinematic spray into the air. And when it comes to a tomato, it peels off paper-thin, translucent slices with absolutely zero effort. This is the ultimate chef's knife. But before it can become a kitchen superstar, it has to go through a brutal, fiery, and incredibly precise transformation. Welcome to the workshop. Today, we are building this knife entirely from scratch, starting with nothing but a raw rectangular block of N690 steel. N690 is a high-end, cobalt-alloyed stainless steel, famous in the bladesmithing world for holding a razor-sharp edge and resisting rust. But right now, it's just a heavy, lifeless bar of metal. To bring it to life, we start with the layout. Using a precise paper template, we trace the exact profile of the knife onto the steel. We use a blue layout marker to make the lines pop, ensuring every curve, plunge line, and angle is perfectly mapped out. This blueprint is our Bible for the next few hours. Now, it's time to make some noise. We grab an angle grinder fitted with a cutting disc and start roughing out the shape. Sparks are flying everywhere as we cut along the blue lines. It's loud, it's messy, and it's the most aggressive part of the process. But the angle grinder only gets us close. To get the true shape, we move to the big belt sander. Wearing heavy protective gloves, we press the rough steel against the spinning abrasive belt. This is where the knife really starts to take form. We carefully grind away the excess metal, following the curves of the blade and the handle. The friction generates intense heat, so we have to constantly dip the steel into a bucket of water to keep it cool and prevent the metal from losing its temper. But a great knife isn't just about the blade. The handle transition is crucial. We use a rotary tool fitted with a purple grinding bit to carefully carve out the finger choil. That's the curved notch right where the blade meets the handle. It requires a steady hand and a lot of patience to get that curve perfectly smooth and ergonomic. Next, we focus on the tang, which is the part of the blade that will sit inside the handle. We coat it in blue layout fluid and use a ruler and center punch to mark our boundaries. Then, it's back to the vise. Using a flat metal file, we manually shape the tang, rounding off the edges and getting the thickness just right. It's slow, meticulous work, but this precision is what separates a good knife from a masterpiece. With the tang shaped, we center punch the marked spots, apply some cutting fluid, and use a drill press to bore through the tough N690 steel for the handle pins. Now, we prep for the bevels, the angled edges that actually do the cutting. We use a marker to draw a crisp line right down the center of the blade's edge. Using calipers, we check the thickness to ensure everything is perfectly symmetrical. Back to the belt sander, we grind the primary bevels. This is the most skill-intensive part of the grind. We hold the blade at a strict, consistent angle against the belt, slowly removing metal to create the cutting edge. Again, we dip it in water frequently. 1 second too long on the belt, and we could overheat the steel, ruining the entire blade. Once the grinding is flawless, it's time for the magic of metallurgy. Heat treatment. We slide the knife into a roaring forge. The flames lick at the steel until it glows a bright, angry orange. While it's still glowing hot, we pull it out and place it on the anvil. Using a custom stamp and a heavy hammer, we emboss our maker's mark right into the hot metal. Then comes the quench. We plunge the glowing blade straight into a tube of engine oil. It instantly erupts in flames and thick smoke as the extreme temperature drop locks the steel's crystalline structure in place. When the smoke clears, we pull out the blackened blade. To prove it worked, we take a metal file and try to scratch the edge. The file just skates right off. It's officially hardened. But right now, that hardened steel is as brittle as thin glass. If we tried to chop a carrot with it right now, it would snap in half. That's why our next crucial step is tempering. We slide the blade into a standard kitchen oven, setting it to exactly 200 degrees Celsius for 1 full hour. This carefully reheats the steel, relieving those intense internal stresses from the quench and giving it the crucial toughness it needs to actually survive daily kitchen abuse. Once it cools down, the blade is covered in a dark, flaky oxide scale from the heat treatment. It looks rough, but that's exactly what we expect. We clamp it securely in the vise and start hand sanding the flat surfaces, working our way through the grits to strip away that scale and reveal the clean, raw steel underneath. Next, we take it back to the big belt sander to refine the primary bevels, clean up the tang, and get the geometry dialed in. You can hear the aggressive hum of the machine as we press the steel against the abrasive belt. It's a delicate dance of grinding and cooling dipping the blade in a bucket of water every few seconds to keep the temperature down. We absolutely cannot afford to overheat the steel and ruin the heat treat we just spent so much time perfecting. Once the grinding is flawless, we move to the buffing wheel. Watching a dull, dark, scorched piece of steel transform into a brilliant, mirror-like finish is honestly the most satisfying part of the whole build. We check the blade with calipers to ensure it's perfectly straight and symmetrical. It's finally looking like a real, professional knife. But a blade is just a sharp stick without a handle. For this build, we're using a stunning combination of stabilized beech and bubinga wood. The bubinga gives us that deep, dark contrast, while the beech provides a beautiful, lighter grain. First, we need to make the guard, or bolster. We cut a small, thick block of the dark, rich bubinga. We measure it precisely, drill a series of overlapping holes to remove the bulk of the material, and then use a small needle file to carefully open up the slot. We test it against the tang, filing away microscopic amounts of wood until the blade slides through with a perfect, snug friction fit. With the guard fitted, it's time for the main handle scales. We take our block of stabilized beechwood and cut it to size on the table saw. Precision is absolutely everything here. We mark our drill points, bore the holes for the brass pins, and use a drill press to carefully route out the channel that will house the tang. We constantly test fit the pieces, guard, tang, and handle scales, making micro adjustments with a file until everything sits completely flush. There are no gaps allowed. Once the fit is flawless, we sand the inside faces of the wood scales on a flat sheet of sandpaper. This ensures maximum surface area for the glue to bite into. We mix up a high-strength 2-part epoxy resin, making sure it's blended perfectly. We coat the tang, the guard, and the inside of the wood scales, then sandwich it all together, inserting the brass pins to mechanically lock it in place. We clamp it tight and let it cure overnight. The next day, the handle is a solid, glued-up block. We take it to the bandsaw and carefully cut away the excess wood, following the rough outline of the handle design. The sawdust is flying as we carve out the basic profile, getting rid of the blocky corners. Now, it's time to carve that block into an ergonomic masterpiece. We start on the disc sander to knock down the sharp corners and establish the basic profile. Then, we move to the belt sander. This is where the real magic happens. Wearing a heavy-duty respirator because wood dust is no joke, we carefully round over the edges, carve out the finger choil, and shape the handle to perfectly fit the hand. It's a delicate process of removing material millimeter by millimeter until the grip feels completely natural. But wait, disaster strikes. As we're shaping the wood, a small crack appears in the beech handle. It happens to the best of us, but we aren't going to let it ruin the build. In fact, we're going to use a brilliant trick to fix it. We take a piece of scrap beechwood and grind it on the sander, catching the fine dust in a plastic container. We mix this fine wood dust with a little bit of 2-part epoxy glue to create a custom, color-matched wood filler. Using a small pick, we pack this thick paste deep into the crack, overfilling it slightly. Once the epoxy cures and hardens, it actually becomes stronger than the original wood. We scrape off the excess and sand it completely flush. You'd never even know it was there. Now that the handle is structurally sound, we move to the final finishing stages. We hand sand the entire handle, working our way up through the finer grits of sandpaper until the wood feels as smooth as glass. Then comes the most satisfying step: applying the finish oil. Watch as the oil soaks into the wood, instantly making the grain pop. The contrast between the light, creamy beech and the dark, rich babinga is absolutely stunning. The handle is finished, but a knife is only as good as its edge. We take the blade back to the sander, this time using a very fine grit belt to polish the edge and remove any microscopic burrs left over from the grinding process. Finally, the moment we've all been waiting for, the ultimate sharpness tests. First up is the classic paper test. The blade glides through a sheet of printer paper like it's slicing through thin air, making clean, effortless curves. Next, we bring out the heavy artillery, a full, unopened carton of milk. With one swift, confident strike, the knife slices right through the thick cardboard and plastic, sending a glorious spray of milk into the air. It cuts so cleanly that the top half just slides off. And for the grand finale, the ultimate test of any chef's knife, the tomato test. A dull knife will crush a tomato, but this blade, it doesn't even need to apply pressure. It effortlessly peels off paper-thin, translucent slices of tomato, proving that this custom N690 steel blade is an absolute kitchen weapon. From a raw bar of steel to a flawless, razor-sharp culinary tool, this build is complete. If you enjoyed watching this knife come to life, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more builds, and let me know in the comments what we should forge next.